Okay, I think it worked. Okay. Okay, and just to kind of preface, the point of this session was we get a lot of different phone calls from different employers. We have a lot of meetings. And we wanted to just provide an information session so everybody in the community that we work with understands how we define an internship at the college, some of the things that we look at. So I'm going to, real quick, Jill, I'm going to make you the host just in case somebody pops in the waiting room.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay. So the first thing I wanted to start off with was the NACE internship definition. If you're not familiar with NACE, I wasn't before I started working in education. It stands for the National Association of Colleges and Employers. It's a really good resource for internships. If you want to know salary ranges, I do a lot of different research on employment for graduates. So we use them a lot. It's pretty much the standard kind of across the country for different colleges and universities. So this is their official definition of an internship. So really it's a form of experiential learning. We really need learning to be at the forefront when we're looking at internship descriptions. It's an opportunity for the student to apply what they're learning in the classroom to a practical setting and a workplace setting. It's an opportunity for students to gain experience and make connections, but also give employers the opportunity to evaluate talent and also the opportunity to guide and mentor. Another piece that I wanted to mention from NACE are the career competencies. This is pretty widely used again by colleges and universities. It was developed to create a language that was the same for employers and colleges. So they did a lot of different research. About 5 years ago, they came out with their career competencies and then they just revised them. They surveyed about 3,000 employers, and these came up as the top soft skills or competencies that students graduating college were missing. So we do a lot of work around these different competencies. We really try to make sure that this is embedded in almost everything that we do with students. Some of it's probably going to jump out and you're going to say, yep, absolutely. Communication is one that we work a ton on with students, learning how to write a professional email, how to have good verbal communication skills. Some of the stuff with the technology now that students have, they're not forced to use as often. So this is a really good overview. And again, this information is on NACE's website. You don't have to be a member to review it. And if you go to their website, there's actually different sample activities and different ways that students can practice this. One of the things that we'll talk about in a little is how we prepare our students and what they do on an internship. And Jill actually has an online career module that the students work through on their internship, and they're built around these competencies. And a journal that we encourage the students to use. And what we really want to see the students do is if they're out in the workplace and they have to work on a project and maybe they hit a roadblock and they're not sure what to do and they have to work in a team or they have to overcome that problem, we want to make sure that they can then demonstrate what they learned in that workplace and be able to articulate that in an interview or on their resume. So we just kind of want to make sure that any employer that's taking interns has a moment to read through this and understand this, because this is something we focus a lot on, and we appreciate when our employer partners can also help the students demonstrate these skills. And obviously, it makes a more well-rounded employee and kind of benefits everyone. I wanted to just touch a little bit on the NCC student. Some of you guys might work with some of our local four-year institutes, and they're all wonderful schools, but we are a community college, and our student base is just a little bit different. If you're not familiar with community colleges, we only have a 2-year degree. That's the highest level of education they can obtain from us. And there's 2 different tracks they can go on. There's AAS programs, which are our career programs, and then AS programs. So if you're not familiar with those 2 acronyms, that's kind of how it's talked about at the school. So you can see about 50% of our students do plan on transferring and are in majors where they end up going to a 4-year school. Obviously, starting at a community college just saves them a ton of money. And we often hear from our students that come back that they wish they could have finished their 4-year at NAC just because our faculty are wonderful. Everybody really makes time for the students. They have a lot of access to the faculty and resources like us. About 40% of the students are in career programs. So to give you an example of kind of what that might be, our trades programs typically are all career programs. We do have one business degree that is more designed straight to career. We have an accounting degree that's straight to career. So that's something, if you guys want more information on, I'd be happy to kind of share that with you and walk you through it. We have over 100 majors. So it can be a little overwhelming if you're trying to identify what students are looking for. And then we have 10% that kind of falls in the other category. So dual enrollment are high school students that are taking college credit. That is increasing every year. It reduces the amount of time they need once they reach college age. It saves them money. So that's something that we see a lot. And then a visiting student would be someone that maybe is just coming to take one class. As you can see, our student diversity is pretty spread out. So, we do have a really good mix of students. If you're looking to kind of increase the diversity at your employee base, I should say, we're close to half and half, which is something that just, again, makes us a little bit more unique. The average age of our student is 25. So we do have younger students that come right from high school, but it's a little bit more common to have someone that maybe did some schooling, went out into the workforce, decided to come back to get more schooling, or maybe was working for 5-6 years and then decided that's not really what they want to do. And then they, pursue a degree. So we do tend to get students that are just a little bit more mature. Not to say that we don't have, our younger students as well. And we also have some older students. And just something that I like to point out to employers is, as a community college, most of our students call Northampton and Monroe County home. They're not just looking for internships, but they're also trying to develop relationships and find full-time jobs upon graduation. And I think that's something that really separates us from some of the other schools in the area. Students aren't moving here for school, they live here. They usually have roots here. And just in case you're not familiar, we do have a campus in Monroe County. So that's why we kind of split between the two.
Katrina, before you move
Yes.
to the next slide, I did want to hop in and say, I think maybe a third of our students, if I'm remembering the number correctly, are working full-time as well. Keep in mind, students who are applying to internships, if you only offer an unpaid internship and it is a adult who is coming back to school and has a family and is looking for a change in career, and they need to work full time, just keep in mind that sometimes it can be a little bit more challenging to fill an unpaid internship. Now, that's not to say it's impossible. We do have some resources here at through our office that students can apply towards, but just in general, keep in mind as you're developing your internship program that a handful of our students are working full time. And that I just wanted to share that because it is important to think about the demographic of our students.
Yep, that's a great point. And I want to say it's 75% are working at least part-time. So very rarely do we meet students that are just full-time students and not working. It's just not really our student demographic. Most of them have just other life responsibilities. And that's also something that makes our students, I think, pretty awesome because they're just really hardworking and driven and know how to balance their time and really manage a lot of different things and have very full plates. So I also want to just quickly touch on kind of what we do through our office to prepare students. I mentioned that we have those different online modules that the students work through. So that's kind of what I'm referring to as the career readiness. All the students that are interested in internships are given a one-on-one appointment with Jill. She reviews their resume or builds their resume if they don't have one. And then we also, do a lot of support in developing their professional writing skills, helping them find internships, learning how to network and all that good stuff. And then they are able to start their career leadership modules before they actually obtain an internship. Some of it we really do try to get them to do ahead of time because it just helps them in the job hunt. And those are the soft skills based around those career competencies. And then we also do review the Spartan code with the students. It's a little cheesy, but I think it's a good way to explain kind of how we try to get them to be ready for the work industry. We really do focus on learning professionalism, appropriate appearance. We do actually have a clothing closet, if you will, called First Impressions. So if a student doesn't have access to kind of work appropriate clothing, we help them with that. We speak to them a lot about reliability and being transparent and accountable, because that's something that's really important to us. If we send you a student, we want to make sure we're sending you a student that's going to show up and really kind of be there. And obviously the importance of building a network. Academically, we set our standards at 2.0, mainly because if you have a student that's only taken a few classes and doesn't do well in one, it really affects their GPA. So we don't want to exclude anyone that's trying to better themselves. So that's something that, if you have a higher GPA standard, that's fine. And we can make sure that that's, advertised to students, but that is kind of where we recommend students, if they're below 2.0, we feel like they need to focus on their academics a little bit more than pursuing an internship.
And to build on that,
Yep,
sorry,
go ahead, Jill.
Katrina, to build on that as well. If I do in my vetting process of students and whatnot, if I do see that a student has, that 2.0 or maybe even juggling between a 2.0, 2.5 range, I make sure to check in with what their grades are at the current time to make sure that they're on the right track to improve that GPA. And then I also redirect them to our online through Blackboard internship experience modules, just as an additional way to demonstrate, that what in the classroom doesn't holistically reflect what their skill level is. So it is a self-guided module. Katrina talked on it a little bit, but it does go through a bunch of different things: resume writing, email writing, networking, all the way to diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings, emotional intelligence. Again, just as another way to demonstrate their.
That's a good point, because when we have a student that's kind of on the borderline, maybe they have a 1.8, right? And we're like, oh, they came to us, they showed interest, like that right there gives us something. Sometimes we'll actually require them to do some of those modules to show us, can they be reliable? Can they follow through? All that good stuff. And since we are a 2-year school, we try not to be too heavy on the credits on what we require. A lot of schools, obviously, it's like more their junior and senior year. And we do really try to get the students to be in their second year. But sometimes we just have eager students that, especially like if they've come from a different career and they have work experience, sometimes we'll let them pursue an internship a little earlier. But we really do like them to have completed at least 2 major courses, preferably more, or 24 credits. 60 credits is what you need to graduate with an associate's degree. So we like them to be at least close to halfway, because the goal of an internship is to apply what you've learned in the classroom, and they're not as beneficial to you guys. It's not as beneficial to them if they haven't learned those pieces yet. So really quickly, to give you an idea of our internship process, we kind of talked a lot about how we work with students. We do try to vet, students. I'm sorry, this is more for you guys. I apologize. This is how we work through employers. So the main things that we really try to do are first vet our employers and make sure that we're on the same page and that we can kind of put you guys in as an approved employer host site, which we'll talk about a little bit more here. All of our job openings are posted on Handshake. If you're able to do that first, that saves us a lot of time. It makes it a lot easier for us to promote the position to our entire student population. And then once you've hired a student for an internship, we have a few pieces of paperwork to complete. A lot of that goes through Handshake. There is one thing that needs an electronic signature. So that would come in a separate email. And then we do ask that anybody that takes interns is willing to schedule a site visit and does agree to complete our student evaluation at the end. So that's kind of like a high level overview. So when I talked about kind of how we vet employers and how we decide, what internships make their way to our students, these are the 4 primary areas that we evaluate. Number 1 is educational value, and I will go into this a little bit in more detail, but we have to make sure that it's a legitimate learning opportunity and not just something that's an operational work experience that just so happens to be done by a student. So they can't just be filling a gap that maybe somebody left and now you could use some help and you would be looking for an intern. We make sure that there's a supervisor or mentor. So the intern really does need to be supervised by somebody that's, the definition says expert, but really what that means is someone that has relevant education or professional experience. So for example, we get a lot of requests from maybe like a small nonprofit or a church to run their social media because they don't know how to do it. That's not really an internship because there's nobody that student can then go ask questions to, right? So it's not that they need to guide them through every step, but if they have questions and they need a little bit of assistance, there's got to be somebody there that can kind of provide that coaching to them. We also evaluate if the resources are in place for the student to do an internship. So if it's remote, are you asking the student to have a laptop? If you are, we got to make sure that the student has that resource available to them. Do you have space set up for them at your office? All those little kind of logistical things. And then compensation, which Jill talked about. I'm not going to dive into this too deeply. We do have an employer guide that I'll reference. You can download it on our website, or we just got some printed copies so I can mail them if anybody's interested. But that walks you through kind of the unpaid internship test. It's something that came out a few years ago from the labor department. And it really kind of walks you through, I think there's 6 or 7 questions that if you can't honestly say that you are meeting those standards, and really it's more of an employee and you might have to pay. So that's something that we can definitely walk you through in a one-on-one meeting. And just to kind of touch a little bit more on, how do you emphasize learning? It's really just trying to connect projects and assignments to what the intern's trying to learn or what they're telling you that they're learning in school. So this is a real rough kind of guide when you're trying to figure out what is the intern going to be working on. We like to see at least half of what they're working on to be independent projects and tasks. So things that you're assigning to them, you can obviously give them guidance and feedback, but things that they need to work on by themselves or in a team. Ideally, now this is best case scenario, but like if they can have about a third of their internship be, maybe it's 1 day a week or half day a week, a couple hours, that maybe they're shadowing different people in the office and people are explaining what they do in their role and showing them little pieces of different areas, allowing them to sit in on a meeting. So if it's a client meeting or even as a staff meeting, just giving them that exposure of kind of what work culture looks like. And also letting them learn different platforms, different systems that you work on, which would benefit you in the long run as well, but giving them opportunities to really grow and develop. And then 20% roughly can be kind of busy work, things that you just need done. So it could be filing, answering calls, mailings, all the different like little things that it's part of a normal job. So it's okay to have that element there. You just don't want it to be the main focus. And I did just want to touch on the learning objectives. It is something in our process, but just so you're aware, we do have the students fill out a form. It's not long. They just have to identify a few goals for the internship. So they're instructed to come to their supervisor and kind of talk through that, then have that form signed. We just encourage whoever is working with the student not to just sign the form and give it back to them. It's just important to read it and understand what their goals are. We're not expecting you to, teach them everything under the sun that they want to know, but if you can kind of just refer back to that and then just keep in mind the things that the student's trying to get out of it, you're going to have a better experience with the intern. And then just some best practices. If you have an internship program or you're looking to develop one, these are just some things that we've seen really stand out and receive some really positive feedback from students. Rotational internships are great because it exposes students to all the different areas of the business. So, some companies I've seen do this successfully will only do it maybe like a half day once a week, and they'll let them rotate to maybe accounting, and then they go to HR, and then it's maybe even IT. But it helps the student understand the different components of a business and how their role plays into the overall picture. Professional development is something that students really value. So if you have, a 12-week internship, sometimes I'll see employers that maybe halfway through, they'll have different people on their staff volunteer to sit down and do a resume review or some interview tips with them. I've seen some companies do a presentation with upper management, and then they have lunch, and that gives the student a chance to meet kind of some of the higher ups in the company, and really kind of understand a little bit more about the company. Shadowing opportunities, as I mentioned. So really anything you can do to kind of enhance the experience for them is great. Routine feedback is probably one of the most important. I know everyone's super busy and it's hard to find more time in your day, but if even half an hour a week or every other week to review the projects the student is working on, the progress they're making, and then giving them an opportunity to ask questions. And really just trying to make sure that there's meaningful work for them. So like I said, it doesn't have to be 100% of the time. There can be things that you just need done in your office. But really just giving them an opportunity to apply what they're learning in the classroom is ideal. And I'm going to throw it over to Jill so you can hear somebody else talk for a little bit.
Yeah, I'll take over. Before I jump in, does anyone have any questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, been keeping my eye on the chat. We should have mentioned sooner, if you don't feel comfortable jumping in and asking a question, just feel free to throw it in the chat. We'll make sure that we answer it. But yeah, so my screen is being a little glitchy. Okay, so first, what are you hiring for? So one thing that we do require is a job description or an internship description, and that can be posted through Handshake. So if most of you, I'm sure, heard of this event through Handshake, so you're probably already on there. If for whatever reason you need some literature on figuring out how to navigate Handshake a little bit more, we can send you some resources, or just feel free to send us an email. We'll help you. But we do require a description posted on Handshake. And so what will that contain? It should have a clear start and end date so that students know when they should have their application in by. And then that's also a good way for Katrina to know how, what length of time do we have to be able to recruit and make sure that all applications are in queue by. Start and end date for an internship is really critical on my end of the work for several reasons. Like Katrina mentioned, I do like to do site visits, send out midterm evaluations. I really won't know when to schedule all of those things if I don't have a specific start and end date. I mentioned that we have some resources for unpaid internships. Again, that really goes based off of the start and end date to know when to provide that, the check and whatnot for students who apply to that and are a selected recipient, and many other reasons. Those are just to list a few. And in general, just have your description as detailed as you can. If you want to write a little description of the company so that they know what your company does, as well as some desired qualifications. Now, a lot of times we see these qualifications written more towards students pursuing a bachelor's degree. Try not to forget our associate's degree folks. A lot of time, if they're in their second year, that's parallel to a sophomore at a 4-year institution. And as we went over, a lot of them have plans to transfer, so they're rising juniors as well. We oftentimes see that these descriptions are written more towards the 4-year institution, which is perfectly fine because they promote the same internship on Handshake to local colleges as well. But sometimes it is a little discouraging for our students, and they think they don't qualify, then they don't apply, and they miss on an opportunity.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jill. And that's just something to keep in mind, because a lot of times I'll talk to recruiters and they'll say, but we're fine with looking at your students. It's like, think about the last time you went to apply for a job and it said master's degree required, and you don't have a master's, right? You're just not going to apply. So that's something else that if you are thinking about trying to get community college students, that is a little bit of a language thing that it might be worth, if you're open to community college students or a rising junior or a sophomore, that does discourage them sometimes. So that's a good point, Jill.
Yeah, and on the contrary, I am meeting with these students, so I do encourage them to still apply, and I communicate to them that most often than not, employers are happy to bring on board a community college student as well. But just to have them, feel confident going into that application would be wonderful. So at least 3 to 4 specific responsibilities, just so that, again, they know what they're applying for. And a compensation amount, you can include that on Handshake, and typically about how many hours per week you would expect. Now, we do recommend over the course of the fall and spring semesters that it is a part-time internship, with availability and flexibility that if it becomes a summer internship or fall break, spring break, all of those different breaks throughout the year, they do have the option to increase hours for those weeks. But typically we do recommend more of a part-time internship for reasons we already went over. You know, these students have families, they're taking full-time classes, they might be working part-time, full-time. So just being able to have some flexibility in their schedule would be great as well. All right, if you don't mind going to the next slide, thank you. Now, how do we promote? Again, this is some information that we've sprinkled in throughout the way, but for the most part, I send out bi-weekly emails to students who have been in touch with me, whether they get in touch with me directly through email, or I'll put a table out in our Lob Lounge, one of the more active spots on campus. I put a table out once a month to let them know that I'm here. I try and push into clubs, classrooms. I create a ton of flyers. So really try and do all of the things that I can. I'm on digital boards, everything that I can on campus to let them know that I'm here. So students come to me in all of those different ways. And then we also use faculty. Faculty is a really great resource. They know the students that are interested. They can outreach to a ton of students at a time. They even know who is a good qualified candidate, so they can encourage a few students that they know is doing really good job in their class and is present and engaged. They can even encourage those students to sign up for internships. And then lastly, this is sort of a new thing that I just launched this semester, and it's been rather successful so far. So I host an info session where I'm now featuring an employer. I was doing these info sessions in the fall semester. So now the difference is I feature one specific employer each info session. And that's just another way to try and recruit some students to be interested. It's also been rather successful in getting the word out there on the employer end. Because we've had a few companies with really great internships that students just weren't applying for whatever reason. So Katrina and I came up with this idea of, you know, if you're not seeing success, well, why don't you bring them? Why don't we have you in front of the students and you talk a little bit about what the internship is. And it's a great networking opportunity even for students who attend. I encourage them, they can send a follow-up email and say, thank you for your time. I'm really interested in X internship. I'd love to hear more about it. So if you think this might be successful for you in recruiting some interns, please contact me. My email is below, and I can also put it in the chat here. If you're interested, I am looking to have an idea of who would be participating in my fall semester info sessions. That's going to be a summer project for me. I do have an agenda that I can email you so that you have specific points to make. It's usually about the first 15-20 minutes of the info session that you would present. I would ask for some slides so that they have some literature and visuals for them to know. But again, if you're interested in this, please email me directly and we can talk more about it. Okay, now a little bit more about Handshake. There's the link on the screen. Again, you probably are already on it, but for whatever reason you're not, that's a good way to get started on posting what your internship is. You can also post jobs. So this is just a great way to recruit in general. So it is the first and easiest step in finding interns, because a lot of times there are students who are on Handshake that have not come and met with me, and I see them applying on Handshake. So it is a good way to just access all students here at the college. I should say that when I do see students applying on Handshake who have not come through our office, I do try and connect with them still to ensure that, you know, they're qualified, their resume is prepared. Again, my biggest mission is to make sure that we are sending off a well-qualified student for you so that you're satisfied as an employer. Promotion, as long as your position meets the standards of an internship, it will be approved. Sometimes I do decline an internship if it just looks like it's written more for a senior. If it's written more for a rising junior, I'll go ahead and approve it. But a lot of times I am seeing descriptions written more for four-year institutions, which makes it a little bit more vulnerable to me decline. So again, just keep that in mind. If you are writing something, please have it be clear that you're open to a rising junior or community college, just to ensure that it gets approved. And lastly, it is a good way for me to schedule interviews, review resumes. As mentioned, you know, there are students who are applying for internships that have not come through our office. So it's a good way to just make sure that I'm vetting them properly. Okay, so the interview and selection process. So I am reviewing resumes, giving feedback. A lot of students don't have a resume yet. So I'll schedule typically an hour-long appointment with them and walk them through it, give them some pointers so that they can do it independently one day. I do encourage them to be monitoring their resume every few months just to make sure it's updated and accurate. And then the interview. So if a candidate is selected for an interview, I am available to meet with them to do a mock interview, go over some common questions. Sometimes students want to do it independently. Other times students want to sit down with me and talk through it. So I definitely support them through that process. And then an offer letter. So if a student is selected, it is encouraged that you send them an email making it a formal that they received the internship offer, as well as communicating that with me. And I always tell students, please let me know if you're offered an internship and you accept it so that I can go through the next phase of the process. A lot of times they forget. So as an employer, I encourage you to include me in that communication so that I know.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just gonna mention here, I added this in actually this morning after an email I got from an employer. When you guys are looking through student resumes and deciding who to bring in, it's important to look beyond the major because we're a community college. It happens a lot when a student's looking for an accounting or a finance internship. Almost all of those students, if they're planning on getting a four-year degree, are gonna take a business management. I think it's business management.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like they want to do business. They're like, oh, well, they picked business as their major, but they're telling me they want accounting. I'm not sure they know what they want to do. That's not the case at all. If you would take our accounting major, it's designed to go straight to career. So what that means is we have some more high level courses that typically if you're transferring to a four-year degree, they're the ones that want to do the high level courses. So if they would take the accounting major at NCC, they would lose a ton of credits. If they want to do a four-year degree in accounting or finance, they really should be majoring in business to get their core business classes done. And then all those classes will transfer with them. So just be conscious of that because there are certain majors that if that's what you want to do 4-year degree wise, it doesn't always correlate. I've had a lot of students that just can't even get past the resume review process because they don't have that specific major. So just be cautious of that. You don't want to be losing out on good candidates because you're being really strict on something that really that is what they want to do. They just don't want to lose the classes that they're taking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really good point. So what happens when a candidate is selected? As long as you're communicating to me or the student, I'll get in touch with you regardless. As long as I know that a student got an internship, I'll give you a heads up that I'm scheduling a meeting with the student. It's typically about a half hour to an hour to complete the paperwork on my end. So I'll send you an email the morning of just saying, hey, I'm meeting with Johnny today. Keep an eye out on your email. you're going to get an email from Handshake, and you're going to get an email from Adobe Sign. So the purpose of Handshake is it's just a way to document for the college that the internship is happening. It provides the site supervisors information so that they receive evaluation forms. And then that's where the student lists their goals. So they may have already had a conversation with you about what their goals are. I can also walk them through it. I do let them know that if they haven't had a conversation with you yet about what their goals are, that we can go back in and make some adjustments so that their goals are accurate. And I do bring up those goals at the site visit as well, just to make sure that the internship is staying on track. And then the Adobe Sign email is going to include the student agreement form and the code of conduct. So when an intern is selected, I do make sure that they are prepared to be professional on site, that they're reflecting Northampton appropriately. That's through the conversation with the code of conduct form, and the student agreement form goes over several different things. One specific highlight that employers find valuable is that it does have an aspect of confidentiality, so that if students are exposed to any confidential files, they make sure that they are practicing confidentiality. And then during an internship, they are completing weekly timesheets, reflection sheets, site visits. Katrina mentioned this, but I just want to reiterate it. In order to be an approved site for Northampton, you do need to be willing for a site visit. Because of COVID, a lot of these site visits have become virtual depending on some circumstances, but ideally I do like to make it there in person to see the facilities. And it's a good way for me to hear, what's going on, get some feedback on the intern. That's usually when I send the midterm evaluation as well. So I'll reach out to you. I'll schedule that about 6 to 8 weeks into the internship. And then post-internship, they are expected to complete a final paper. I'll send out final evaluations. In general, schedule a meeting with them so that I can help update their resume. But you as an employer can also be in a support to make sure that their resume looks good. That's a good time to do any final presentations. And I think that's about it with the post-internship. One thing, since I had mentioned code of conduct and all of those things, one really important thing for employers to know is that Title IX does extend to the internship site. I just want to read this bolded part so that we're all on the same page, but Title IX states that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So please just keep in mind that Title IX does carry over. And in general, if your company has any type of diversity training, we encourage you to have the interns participate in that because it's just so important in the world that we live in. So any career readiness, professional development trainings, just keep your interns in mind as well.
Great, thanks, Joe. So that's pretty much it for internships. So feel free to throw questions in the chat. I'm going to breeze through this pretty quick so we have some time for questions at the end. But while we had you, we figured we'd kind of just talk about some additional ways that you can engage students. I wanted to mention micro internships. It's a relatively new concept. If you see this website right here, info.parkerdewey.com/Northampton, that'll take you to the landing page. But micro internships are paid short-term professional assignments. So unlike a traditional internship, these only range from maybe 5 to 40 hours. They're independent projects that the student works on. The social media example I gave earlier, it would be fine for a micro internship for that to be something that you're not an expert in. So this is really good for really like any project-based assignments. And I will send the slide deck out after, but the link at the bottom with the company tutorial has some really great resources if you're new to Parker Dewey. Parker Dewey manages the website and manages all the postings for micro internships. And they also handle all the paperwork for the students. So they're treated like a 1099 employee. And you don't have to do any of that. You get an invoice, you set the amount, as long as the amount is reasonable, you can't pay somebody $2 an hour, like they'll flag that and take that down. And if you're not able to pay, if you're a nonprofit or you don't have the budget for it, you can contact us. We do have a small amount of scholarships for these as well. So, really the benefits of doing a micro internship is that you can get help year round. So it's not limited to semesters. So a lot of what Jill was just talking about was, roughly 12 weeks. They normally align with summer, fall, or spring semester. So that's something that allows you to handle some projects that you might have going on at other times of the year. It also really helps you build your employee pipeline. We just launched this in the fall, and we've already seen a few students that did a micro internship and then got hired part-time or then got hired on as an intern. These can be done fully remote. So this is a nationwide opportunity. So if you're looking for a student to complete a project and you don't really necessarily, you're not trying to build your pipeline, that is an option. If you post through our website, it would first be featured to our students, but if you are open to someone anywhere in the country, you can open it up. And really what it does is free up time for your staff. So there's a lot of stuff that we all have on our back burner. Like when I get time, I'm going to review my manual, or I'm going to update my website, or whatever it is. These are things that really just kind of require an extra set of hands and would be really beneficial to someone that's really just launching their career. So I know it's a little bit of a unique concept. So I wanted to give you guys some samples of what this can look like. So it can be something as simple as content creation. So they might not even be doing the marketing flyers that you need done, but you need somebody to come up with the content for that. We were just talking a lot about job descriptions. You could have an HR micro internship that's building out 10 different intern job descriptions, or reviewing your job descriptions and making sure that it's meeting all the different standards that you have at your company. So when you go on the website, you can see some of these in a little bit more depth and read through them. We've seen a bunch of companies post for diversity, equity, and inclusion, where the student really is just doing research and helping them create kind of what they're going to have at their company. So it's really all across the board. It's really as wide as you feel creative to do so. You can post 5 at a time, you can post 1. But again, this is something we can kind of walk you through, but these are short-term assignments that are independently done. So we do let the students know they're not going to be receiving the same level of mentorship and supervision as they would on an internship. The other thing I wanted to mention is we do have a job shadow program. We started about 2 years ago. We run it over our winter break. So it's typically the first 2 weeks of January. Last year, we had about 85 students participate, 70 of which were NCC students. We had 14 participate from local high schools. This timeline will kind of give you an idea of how early we start getting people signed up for it. I'll start recruiting employers probably mid-August, and then we'll have it wrapped up by mid-October. Once we have all our employers signed up, we post them all on our website, and students can apply for the ones they're interested in. We let the students know right after Thanksgiving where they were matched. We have a mandatory orientation that they have to complete before they're given the details of their job shadow. Very similar to what we've been talking about. We want to make sure that these students are prepared and reliable. And then the program, runs over those 2 weeks. So as an employer, you could say, all right, I'm good for January 7th. I can do a half day. I'm willing to take 5 students or 1 student, or I'd be willing to do it for 2 days. This has been done virtually and in person. Obviously in 2021 winter, it was pretty much all virtual with the exception of a few employers. This past January was real fun. It went from being mainly in person to kind of, every day it was like somebody had COVID or the student had COVID or the employer. So it was a mix this past year. So it can be done either way. We don't recommend virtual to be more than a half day. It's just a little bit too much time on the computer. So that's something I'd be happy to walk anybody through, but we've seen some good success with employers being able to hire from that pool or bring on interns. And really kind of just some of the benefits to it is, the biggest benefit to me, it's kind of like a mini interview with the student. If they're engaged and they're asking questions, did they show up on time? How are they dressed? You're really learning a lot about that student and you're building relationships with them. We encourage them to have their resume ready so they can hopefully leave that with you. And it can really kind of start creating a pipeline for future employees. And really the biggest thing too is that you're building your brand. So if you're a company that's not as well known as the PPLs and Crayolas of the world, this is a way to kind of get your name out on campus, to get faculty familiar with who you are. Faculty, as we mentioned, are a pretty big key. So we send all of these opportunities to our faculty to share with students. That could be possibly a way in to be on an advisory board for a certain department. So it's really kind of just a way to build your company on our campus. And it's also a meaningful engagement opportunity for your current employees. So if you're looking to build more volunteer opportunities, the students typically will spend time with a professional and do at least one informational interview type thing for an hour while they're on their job shadow. Sometimes there's different presentations and things like that, but most people enjoy talking about how they got to where they are right now and reflecting on what education they had and all that good stuff. So that's really just a good feel-good thing for your current employees, and a way for them to kind of mentor and engage. And that is all I have for you. This is our contact information. Again, I will send this out. But there's my phone number. And Jill, I'm sorry, I didn't know your office number. So if you want to throw that in the chat, but email is probably the easiest way with us still kind of working a hybrid schedule. I'm going to stop sharing, see what questions we have, and stop recording.